3 months had passed since the Centauran incident, and Jake felt like a different person. Lyra had taken him to 6 different worlds and introduced him to military leaders from all the Alliance species. He had learned about energy weapons that could cut through solid steel and shield technology that could stop asteroids. He had watched Corvan warriors fight with honor codes that were older than human civilization and seen Zentari battle formations that moved like a single living creature. But something was wrong in the galaxy. Reports were coming in from the Outer Rim worlds about strange Vorthic activity. Their ships were moving in new patterns and using tactics that no one had seen before. Alliance forces that should have been winning battles were getting defeated by enemies they thought they understood. Jake was in his quarters, reading the latest intelligence reports when his door chimed. Lyra entered, but she was not alone. Behind her walked a woman in a human military uniform that Jake recognized immediately. Captain Lisa Hayes, Jake said, standing up quickly. "What are you doing here?" Captain Hayes was his former commanding officer and one of the toughest soldiers he had ever known. She had short red hair and green eyes that missed nothing. Right now, those eyes looked worried. "Hello, Jake," she said. "I wish this was a social visit, but we have a problem." "A big one." Lyra gestured toward the chairs. "Perhaps we should all sit down. Captain Hayes has brought disturbing news from the front lines." They sat around the small table where Jake and Lyra usually had their meals. Captain Hayes opened a datapad and showed them a tactical display. "3 weeks ago, we lost contact with New Geneva Colony," she said. "It's a research station with about 5,000 people, including a lot of families. When we sent a rescue fleet to investigate, they found this." The display showed the wreckage of Alliance ships floating in space. Some had been cut cleanly in half, while others looked like they had been torn apart by massive claws. "The Vorthic did this?" Jake asked. "That's what we thought at first. But look at these weapon signatures." Captain Hayes pointed to data readings on the screen. "These are Alliance weapons. Someone used our own technology against us." Lyra leaned closer to examine the data. "That should be impossible. Alliance weapon systems have security codes that prevent them from being used by unauthorized species. Unless someone gave them the codes," Captain Hayes said grimly. "We think there's a traitor somewhere in the Alliance command structure. Someone has been feeding the Vorthic information about our tactics and technology." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "How long has this been going on?" "We're not sure. Maybe months, maybe longer. But it explains why we've been losing battles we should have won. The Vorthic always seem to know exactly where we're going to be and what we're going to do." "What does this have to do with me?" Jake asked. Captain Hayes smiled, but it was not a happy expression. "Command wants to send in a team that the traitor doesn't know about. Someone who can get to New Geneva and figure out what happened without triggering any alarms in the system. You want me to go on a mission. I want you to lead a mission. Your new rank gives you authority to assemble a team from any Alliance forces. But more importantly, your human tactics are something the Vorthic haven't figured out how to counter yet." Jake looked at Lyra, who was studying the tactical display with a serious expression. "What do you think?" he asked her. "I think Captain Hayes is right about the traitor," Lyra said. "These attack patterns show too much knowledge of Alliance weaknesses. But I also think this mission is extremely dangerous. New Geneva is deep in contested space, and if the Vorthic are expecting Alliance forces, they won't be expecting humans," Captain Hayes interrupted. "Jake, your people have only been in 2 major battles since joining the Alliance, Kepler Station and the Proxima Defense. Both times you used tactics that caught everyone by surprise, including your own allies, because we don't follow the standard playbook." "Exactly. You adapt and improvise in ways that drive Alliance commanders crazy but get results. The Vorthic have been studying our standard procedures, but they haven't had time to study human methods." Jake stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see the stars and the vast darkness between them. Somewhere out there, people were trapped or dead because someone had betrayed the Alliance. It made him angry in a way that reminded him of the Battle of Kepler Station. "What kind of team are we talking about?" he asked. Captain Hayes activated another display. "Small and fast. Maybe 20 people total. I can give you a squad of human Marines who volunteered specifically to serve under your command. You can pick the rest from Alliance forces. I want Lyra as my tactical advisor." Both women looked surprised. Captain Hayes recovered first. "Jake. She's a cultural liaison, not a military officer. She has 3 degrees including military strategy," Jake said. "And she knows more about Alliance technology and tactics than anyone I've met. Plus she understands how different species think and fight." Lyra stood up slowly. "Lieutenant, I am honored by your confidence, but I have never served in combat. My military experience is purely theoretical. Sometimes theoretical knowledge is exactly what you need. You helped me understand why the Centauran negotiations were failing. Maybe you can help me understand why the Vorthic are winning, Captain." Hayes looked from Jake to Lyra and back again. "This isn't just about her tactical knowledge, is it?" Jake felt his face getting warm. "I trust her judgment. In a situation like this, trust matters more than experience." "He is right about that." Lyra sighed quietly. "And if Lieutenant Morrison believes I can contribute to the mission, then I accept the assignment." Captain Hayes made some notes on her datapad. "All right, Lyra, welcome to the team. But Jake, you need to understand something. This isn't a training, exercise, or a diplomatic mission. If we're right about the traitor, then we're walking into a trap. The Vorthic will be waiting for us. Then we better make sure we don't give them what they're expecting." "What do you mean?" Jake turned back to the tactical display. "Every Alliance mission follows the same basic pattern. Jump in fast, establish a perimeter security objective, and call for backup. It's efficient and it usually works. So what would you do differently?" "I don't know yet, but I know it won't be what they're expecting." Captain Hayes stood up. "We leave in 3 days. That gives you time to select your team and plan the mission. Jake, I want you to know that Command is putting a lot of faith in you. If this goes wrong, a lot of people are going to die whether we try to help them or not," Jake interrupted. "At least this way they have a chance." After Captain Hayes left, Jake and Lyra sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Lyra spoke. "Are you certain you want me on this mission, Lieutenant? Captain Hayes was right that I have no combat experience." Jake looked at her silver skin and violet eyes and felt something in his chest that he had been trying to ignore for weeks. "I'm certain," he said. "I can't imagine doing this without you." Lyra smiled, but there was sadness in it. "Then I will do everything I can to help you succeed. Even if it means we might not survive to see the results, we'll survive," Jake said with more confidence than he felt. "We have to." 2 weeks later, Jake was beginning to understand just how big the galaxy really was. Lyra had started his education with simple lessons about the 12 species in the Alliance. Each one was completely different from the others and from humans. The Zentari were insect-like creatures who thought as a group mind. The Corvin were massive bear-like beings who valued honor above everything else. The Sileni were energy beings who could change their shape at will. Jake found it all fascinating, but also overwhelming. Every species had different customs, different ways of fighting, and different ideas about leadership. Lyra was a patient teacher who explained everything clearly and answered his endless questions without getting annoyed. They were in what Lyra called the cultural center of the ship. It was a huge room with displays showing different worlds and their inhabitants. Jake was studying a hologram of Corvin warriors when Lyra approached with a concerned expression. "Lieutenant, we have received a request from the Centauran Trade Council," she said. "They want Alliance mediation for a dispute that has been going on for 3 months. Admiral Chun has asked if you would like to observe the process." "What kind of dispute?" Jake asked. 3 different species are arguing over mining rights to an asteroid field. The Zentari claim they found it first. The Corvin say their ancestors hunted in that space centuries ago. The Veltar insist they have a legal contract that gives them exclusive access. Jake turned off the hologram. Sounds complicated. What does observing involve? We would travel to Centauri Station and sit in on the negotiations. You would not participate, but you could see how alliance diplomacy works. It might help you understand the political situation. Better, the trip to Centauri Station, two days on a fast courier ship. Jake spent most of the time reading reports about the mining dispute and asking Lyra questions about interstellar law. By the time they arrived, he felt like his head was full of information he barely understood. Centauri Station was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. It was a massive structure that looked like several cities connected by bridges and tubes. Ships from dozens of different worlds were docked at various levels. The corridors were crowded with beings of all shapes and sizes, conducting business in languages Jake could not identify. Lyra led him through the maze of passages to a conference room where the negotiations were taking place. Through a window, Jake could see representatives from the three species sitting at a circular table. In the center sat an alliance mediator who looked frustrated. "They have been arguing the same points for weeks," Lyra whispered. "Each side refuses to compromise, and the mediator cannot find a solution that satisfies everyone." Jake watched as the Centauri representative made rapid clicking sounds while displaying holographic images. The Corvin delegate responded by pounding the table with a massive fist. The Veltar diplomat simply sat in silence looking annoyed. "What are they saying?" Jake asked. Lyra listened for a moment. "The Centauri are showing evidence of their exploration ships in that region. The Corvin is stating that exploration rights do not override ancestral hunting grounds. The Veltar representative is not speaking because their culture considers it rude to interrupt, but if the Veltar don't speak up, they won't get their point across." Exactly. Each species is following their own cultural rules, which makes communication almost impossible. Jake studied the situation. Back on Earth, when his squad had disputes, they would talk it out until everyone understood each other's position. But that approach required everyone to participate in the same way. "Can I suggest something?" Jake asked. Lyra looked surprised. "You want to participate, but you have no authority here and very little experience with alliance law. Maybe that's what they need. Someone who doesn't know all the rules." After some discussion with the mediator, Jake was allowed to address the representatives. He walked into the room feeling nervous but determined. All three aliens looked at him with curiosity. "I'm Lieutenant Jake Morrison," he said. "I'm new to the Alliance, and I don't know much about interstellar law. But I've been watching your discussion, and I think I see the problem." The Corvin delegate leaned forward. "What problem do you see, human? You're all trying to prove you're right, instead of trying a solution that works for everyone. Back home, we call that arguing past each other." The Centauri representative made rapid clicking sounds that Lyra translated as skepticism. "Let me ask you this," Jake continued. "What do each of you actually need from this asteroid field?" The Centauri spoke first through their translator. "We require rare minerals for our technology." The Corvin pounded the table again. "We need a place for our young warriors to prove themselves in the hunt." The Veltar finally spoke in a quiet voice. "We need the resources to build a new colony ship," Jake nodded. "So you need minerals, you need a hunting ground, and you need building materials. Are these things all in the same place?" The three representatives looked at each other with confusion. "What I mean is," Jake said, "are the minerals you need in the same asteroids as the hunting creatures and the construction materials?" Lyra quickly accessed the survey data. "Actually, no. The rare minerals are concentrated in the outer asteroids. The creatures the Corvin hunt live in the inner asteroids near the gas giant. The construction materials are in the middle belt." Jake smiled. "Then why are you fighting over the whole field when you each only need part of it?" The room was quiet for a long moment. Then the Corvin delegate started laughing. It was a deep booming sound that shook the walls. "The human is right," he said. "We have been fighting over territory when we should have been dividing resources." Within an hour, they had worked out an agreement. The Centauri got exclusive mining rights to the outer belt. The Corvin got the inner belt as a hunting preserve. The Veltar got the middle belt for construction materials. Each group would patrol their own section and help protect the others from pirates. As they walked back to their ship, Lyra was unusually quiet. Finally, Jake asked her what was wrong. "I'm trying to understand what just happened," she said. 3. Months of formal negotiations fail, but you solved the problem in one conversation. How Jake thought about it. "I think maybe because I didn't know it was supposed to be complicated. Where I come from, when people have a problem, they talk about what they need and try to find a way. Everyone can get it. But what about legal precedents and territorial claims and cultural honor? Those things matter, but they shouldn't get in the way of solving the actual problem. Sometimes the simplest answer is the right answer." Lyra stopped walking and looked at him with those violet eyes. "Your people continue to amaze me, Lieutenant. You approach problems in ways that never occurred to you." Is that good or bad?" "I think it might be exactly what the Alliance needs," she said. "We have become so focused on protocol and procedure that we sometimes forget the goal is to find solutions, not to follow rules." That night, as Jake lay in his quarters thinking about the day, he realized something had changed between him and Lyra. She was no longer just his teacher or his cultural guide. She had become someone he genuinely cared about and respected. Someone whose opinion mattered to him more than it probably should. The thought worried him more than he wanted to admit. Jake woke up 3 days later feeling much stronger. The HFY had moved him to what they called his new quarters, but it looked more like a luxury hotel room than anything else. The bed was huge and soft, and the walls were made of some kind, a material that showed pictures of peaceful landscapes from different worlds. There was a sitting area with chairs that adjusted to his body when he sat in them, and a bathroom that was bigger than his entire apartment back on Earth. He was trying to figure out how the shower worked when he heard a soft sound at the door. It opened, and Lyra walked in carrying a tray of food. She moved with that same dancing grace he remembered, and today she wore a simple blue dress that made her silver skin look even more beautiful. "Good morning, Lieutenant Morrison," she said, setting the tray on a small table. "I brought you breakfast. The HFY said you should eat real food now instead of the medical supplements." Jake lifted the tray and saw things he did not recognize. There were fruits in colors that did not exist on Earth and some kind of bread that seemed to glow slightly. Everything smelled good but alien. "Thank you, but I can get my own food," Jake said. "You don't need to bring me meals," Lyra looked confused. "It is my honor to serve you, Lieutenant. Preparing your meals and caring for your needs is why I am here. Look, Lyra, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but where I come from, we don't have servants. I grew up making my own breakfast, and I can keep doing that." Her violet eyes showed something that might have been hurt. "Have I done something wrong?" "Is the food not to your liking?" Jake felt bad immediately. She was trying to be nice, and he was being rude. "No, the food looks great. I just feel weird about having someone wait on me." "I'm not used to it." Lyra sat down across from him, and her expression became serious. "May I explain something about my people, Lieutenant? Among the Aetherians, serving a great warrior is not what you call being a servant. It is a sacred duty that brings honor to our entire family. When I volunteered for this position, my parents wept with joy. My younger brother wrote songs about it." Jake picked up one of the strange fruits and took a bite. It tasted like strawberries mixed with something he could not identify, but it was good. "Sacred duty. I don't understand. My people believe that. Those who risk their lives to protect others deserve our highest respect and care. We study the great warriors throughout history and learn from their wisdom. By serving you, I am not lowering myself. I am raising myself to a position of honor. But you're clearly educated and intelligent. You could probably do any job you wanted. Why choose this?" Lyra smiled, and it made her whole face light up. "I have 3 degrees in cultural studies and military strategy. I served as an advisor to our planetary defense force before volunteering for this position. This is not a punishment or a last resort, Lieutenant. This is the job I wanted most in the galaxy. Jake took another bite of the fruit while he thought about that. Everything he knew about servants came from old movies and history books about rich people who looked down on the people who worked for them. But Lyra was not some poor person forced to work for him. She was choosing to be here. I still don't feel right about it, he said finally. Where I grew up in Detroit, we believe all people are equal. Nobody should have to serve somebody else. That is very noble, Lyra said. But what if I want to serve? What if helping you succeed makes me happy? Are you taking away my choice by refusing my help? That made Jake stop eating. He had not thought about it that way. I guess I never considered that angle. Human culture is fascinating to me, Lieutenant. Your people have this idea that everyone should be treated the same regardless of their background or achievements. It is very different from most species in the Alliance, where status and hierarchy are very important. Yeah, we're big on equality. Sometimes too big, maybe. Lyra leaned forward with interest. What do you mean? Jake put down the fruit and tried to explain. Sometimes we get so focused on treating everyone the same that we forget to recognize when someone does something special. Like when I got back from my first deployment, my mom wanted to throw a party, but I told her not to because I didn't want people to think I was showing off. But you had done something worthy of celebration. I guess so. But it felt weird being the center of attention. That explains much about your reaction to the Council's honors, Lyra said. You are uncomfortable with recognition even when it is deserved. Before Jake could answer, there was a sound at the door, and it opened again. A human woman walked in wearing a uniform he recognized. She was tall and stern-looking with gray hair pulled back tight and the kind of eyes that missed nothing. Jake jumped to his feet when he saw the stars on her collar. Admiral Chun, he said, trying to stand at attention in his pajamas. Relax, Lieutenant, Admiral Chenwei said with a small smile. This is not a formal visit. I wanted to check on your recovery and discuss your future. Jake gestured to one of the chairs. Please sit down, ma'am. This is Lyra. She's been assigned to help me. Lyra stood and bowed respectfully. It is an honor to meet you, Admiral. The pleasure is mine, Admiral Chun said, sitting down. I have heard excellent things about your people's diplomatic skills. Thank you, Admiral. Admiral Chun turned back to Jake. How are you feeling, Lieutenant? Ready to get back to work. Yes, ma'am. When do I ship out? The Admiral laughed. Not so fast. The Council has big plans for you, but first you need to understand what you're getting into. The Alliance includes 12 different species, each with their own military traditions and cultural expectations. If you're going to train their forces, you need to understand how they think and fight. I can learn on the job, ma'am. I'm sure you could, but the Council wants to do this right. They're offering you 6 months of cultural and military education. Think of it as officer training for the Galactic Age. Jake looked at Lyra, who was watching him carefully. What would that involve? Lyra here will be your guide and teacher. She knows more about Alliance cultures and military systems than most career diplomats. You'll visit different worlds, meet with military leaders, and learn how each species approaches warfare. And after that, you'll have your own training facility and a staff of instructors from multiple species. Your job will be to teach them human tactics and help them develop new strategies that combine the best of all our approaches. Jake was quiet for a long moment. It sounded like a big responsibility, and he was not sure he was the right person for it. What if I mess it up? Admiral Chun stood up. Lieutenant, you held off an entire Vorthic assault fleet with nothing but standard equipment and human stubbornness. I think you can handle teaching some aliens how to think outside the box. After the Admiral left, Jake sat back down at the table. Lyra was still watching him with those violet eyes. Are you willing to be my teacher? He asked. It would be my greatest honor, Lieutenant, she said with that perfect smile. Jake Morrison felt like his head was full of cotton and his mouth tasted like metal. His eyes opened slowly, and everything looked blurry at first. White lights above him were too bright and made him blink several times. He tried to move, but his body felt heavy and weak, like he had not used it in a very long time. Where was he and what happened to him? The last thing he remembered was the sound of explosions and laser fire all around him. He was at Kepler Station holding his position while his team got the scientists out. The Vorthik ships kept coming and coming. His rifle was getting hot from so much shooting, and his armor was cracked in 3 places. Then there was a big explosion, and everything went dark. Now he was lying on some kind of bed, but it was not like any hospital bed he had ever seen. The room was too clean and too white. Strange sounds came from machines around him that he did not recognize. The air smelled different, too, like flowers mixed with something chemical. A tall figure moved into his view. It looked like a person, but made of clear crystal that caught the light and threw it back in rainbow colors. The being had no face that Jake could see, but somehow he knew it was looking at him. "Staff Sergeant Morrison, you are awake," the crystal being said, but its voice came from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. "I am Dr. Zephyrhai, and I have been taking care of you for the past month. Please do not try to sit up too quickly. Your body needs time to adjust a month." Jake tried to speak, but only a rough sound came out. The Zephyrhai moved closer and held up a small device that shot a cool mist into Jake's mouth. The metal taste went away, and his throat felt better. "What happened?" Jake asked. His voice was still rough, but at least the words came out right. "You have been unconscious since the Battle of Kepler Station. Your actions that day saved over 3,000 lives and turned the war in our favor. The Vorthik forces have pulled back to their home systems. You are a hero, Staff Sergeant Morrison." Hero. Jake did not feel like a hero. He felt tired and confused, and he wanted to know where his squad was. "Where are my men? Are they safe?" "What?" "About Sergeant Collins and Private Martinez. Your squad is safe. They were evacuated as planned. Sergeant Collins has been promoted and is now training new recruits. Private Martinez was wounded, but he recovered fully. They both wanted to be here when you woke up, but they are on active duty 3. Systems away." Jake tried to sit up despite what the doctor said. His head spun, but he managed to get his elbows under him. The room was much bigger than he first thought. Through a large window, he could see stars and part of what looked like a massive ship. This was not Earth, and this was not any human medical facility. "Where am I, Doctor? You are aboard the Alliance flagship Starwind. After your injuries, we brought you here because we have the best medical technology in the galaxy. The Galactic Council wanted to make sure you received the finest care possible. Galactic Council." Jake had heard of them, but only in briefings. They were the group that made decisions for all the alien species fighting the Vorthik. Humans were new members and not very important in the big picture. Why would they care about one human soldier? Dr. Zephyrhai seemed to read his thoughts. "Your species continues to surprise us, Staff Sergeant Morrison. The way you held that position for 6 hours against impossible odds. The way you adapted your tactics when your weapons overheated. The way you used the station's own systems as weapons when everything else failed. It was unlike anything we have seen from any warrior in the Alliance." Jake remembered some of it now. When his rifle died, he had used the station's maintenance robots as bombs. When those ran out, he had rerouted power from the life support to create electrical traps. It had seemed like the obvious thing to do at the time. The Council has voted to award you their highest honor. The Star of Valor has only been given to 12 beings in the history of the Alliance. You are the first human to receive it. I just did my job, Doctor. Anyone in my position would have done the same thing. Dr. Zephyrhai made a sound that might have been laughter. That is exactly what the other 11 said. It seems to be a quality shared by all true heroes. The door to the room opened with a soft sound, and someone walked in. Jake looked over and felt his breath catch. She was beautiful, but in a way that was clearly not human. Her skin was smooth and silver like polished metal, but it moved and flexed like normal skin. Her eyes were large and violet-colored and seemed to glow with their own light. She was tall and graceful and moved like she was dancing even when just walking. She wore simple clothes that looked expensive, and her long silver hair was pulled back in a complex pattern. When she saw that Jake was awake, she smiled, and it was the most perfect smile he had ever seen. "Staff Sergeant Morrison," she said, and her voice was like music. "I am Lyra of the Etherian people. I have been assigned to serve as your personal attendant as part of your reward from the Council personal attendant." Jake looked from her to Dr. HFY and back again. "I don't understand. I don't need an attendant. I can take care of myself." Lyra's smile faltered slightly. "It is a great honor among my people to serve a warrior of your standing. The Council felt that you should have someone to help you adjust to life in the Alliance and to assist with your new responsibilities." "New responsibilities." Dr. HFY moved closer to the bed. "You have been promoted to Lieutenant Morrison. The Council has offered you a position training Alliance forces in human combat techniques. Your methods could save countless lives in future battles." Jake's head was spinning again, but not from being weak. A month ago, he was just another human soldier in a war that seemed too big to understand. Now he was apparently some kind of hero with an alien servant and a job training other aliens how to fight like humans. "I need time to think about this," he said. "Of course," Lyra said. "I will be nearby if you need anything. The Council does not expect an answer immediately. You must recover your strength first." She bowed slightly and turned to leave. Jake watched her go and found himself staring. She moved like water, and her silver skin caught the light in ways that made her seem to glow. When the door closed behind her, he realized he had been holding his breath. "She is quite remarkable," Dr. HFY said. "The Etherians are among the most intelligent species in the Alliance. Lyra volunteered for this position specifically. She studied human culture for months preparing to serve you." "She volunteered?" Jake asked. "Why would she do that? Among her people, serving a great warrior is considered one of the highest honors possible. She gave up a position in their diplomatic corps for the chance to be assigned to you." Jake lay back down and stared at the ceiling. Everything was happening too fast. A month ago, his biggest worry was making sure his squad had enough ammunition. Now he had aliens calling him a hero and a beautiful alien woman who wanted to be his servant. He closed his eyes and tried to make sense of it all, but sleep was already pulling him under. Tomorrow he would have to figure out what came next. The negotiations between humans and Zephyrians had been going on for 2 weeks when the extremist faction made their move. War Commander Zekmoth had been quietly gathering support from commanders who believed that any cooperation with humans was a betrayal of Zephyrian values. Jake was in the command center when Chris detected the unauthorized ship movements. "Captain, we've got multiple vessels breaking away from the main fleet. They're moving toward the human colonies in the Outer Rim." Admiral White looked grim as she studied the tactical display. "How many ships?" 30 warships under Zekmoth's command," Chris replied. "And they're not responding to recall orders from War Commander Vextai. Zerathix had been helping with translation duties when the alert came in." She immediately understood what was happening. "Zekmoth was my mentor when I was a young warrior. He believes that strength comes only through conquest and that any Zephyrian who shows mercy to an enemy is weak." "Can he be stopped?" Admiral White asked. "Not by words," Zerathix replied sadly. "He will only understand the language of battle. And he knows that if he destroys human colonies, it will make peace impossible between our peoples." Jake realized the stakes. If those colonies are attacked, every human in space will demand revenge. Even if we want peace, our own people won't accept it. Admiral White made a command decision. "We need a joint response. Human and Zephyrian ships working together to stop this rogue faction." War Commander Vextai agreed to the plan, but with obvious reluctance. The idea of Zephyrian ships fighting against other Zephyrian ships was almost unthinkable in their culture. But the alternative was a war that would destroy everything they had worked toward. The joint fleet that assembled was small but symbolic. 5 human ships and 3 Zephyrian vessels under unified command. Jake found himself appointed as tactical coordinator, with Zerathix serving as his liaison to the Zephyrian crews. "This is madness," muttered Captain Pete Davis of the human cruiser Intrepid, "fighting alongside aliens against other aliens. 6 months ago, we didn't even know they existed. 6 months ago, we thought we were alone in the universe." Jake replied, "Things change. The flight to intercept Zekmuth's force took 3 days. During that time, Jake worked with Zerathix to coordinate tactics between species that had completely different approaches to warfare. The humans favored flexibility and surprise, while the Zephyrians preferred disciplined formations and overwhelming firepower. "Your people think too much," Zerathix observed as she watched Jake plan their attack strategy. "They consider every possibility, every option. Sometimes action is more important than perfect planning." "Your people don't think enough," Jake replied with a smile. "They charge straight ahead with honor and discipline, but don't adapt when the situation changes." Amy had been monitoring communications from both fleets. "Captain, Zekmuth is broadcasting some kind of manifesto. The translation software is having trouble with it, but he seems to be declaring himself the true defender of Zephyrian honor." Zerathix listened to the broadcast, and her expression grew dark. "He claims that I am a traitor who has been corrupted by human weakness. He says that working with your people will make the Zephyrian Empire soft and vulnerable to conquest by other races." "Is he right?" Jake asked quietly. Zerathix considered the question seriously. "Perhaps we will become different than we were. But different does not mean weak. I have learned that there are many kinds of strength." The interception took place near the human colony of New Terra, a farming world with over 1 million civilian inhabitants. Zekmuth's ships had already begun their attack when the joint fleet arrived. Jake found himself commanding a battle unlike anything in military history. Human and Zephyrian ships fought side by side with crews that had been enemies weeks earlier, now coordinating their attacks against the extremist faction. The tactical situation was complex. Zekmuth's forces held the high ground in orbit around New Terra, while the joint fleet had to approach through a debris field left over from an ancient asteroid collision. The extremists had superior numbers, but they were not expecting coordinated resistance. "Lisa, can you use those mining charges to clear us a path through the debris?" Jake asked over the communication system. "Already on it, Captain," Lisa replied from her position on the demolition ship Hammer. "Just give me a few minutes to calculate the blast pattern." Zerathix was coordinating with the Zephyrian ships in the joint fleet. "War Leader Tekvol reports. His vessels are ready to engage, but he requests permission to challenge Zekmuth to individual combat." "Tell him this isn't about individual honor," Jake said. "This is about protecting innocent people." The battle that followed tested everything. Both species had learned about working together. Human ships used their speed and maneuverability to distract the extremists, while Zephyrian vessels delivered devastating firepower strikes. The combination of tactics proved more effective than either approach alone, but the real test came when Zekmuth's flagship, the Stellar Blade, broke through the joint fleet's formation and headed directly for the planet's surface. The massive warship had enough firepower to destroy entire cities. "He's going to bombard the civilian population centers," Chris reported from his sensor station. "We can't intercept him in time." Zerathix made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. "Jake Morrison, I request permission to transfer to the Stellar Blade." "That's suicide," Jake protested. "Even if you could get aboard that ship, Zekmuth has 100 warriors with him. I am still technically under his command." Zerathix explained. "Zephyrian law requires that he grant me the right to challenge his orders through combat. If I can delay him long enough, ... Jake understood immediately. "Amy, prepare a boarding pod. Ben, get her everything she needs for battlefield medicine." "Jake." "Morrison," Zerathix said as she prepared to leave. "If I do not survive this, make sure our peoples remember what we accomplished together." The boarding pod launched from Jake's ship and attached itself to the Stellar Blade's hull like a metallic parasite. Zerathix cut her way through the armor, plating, and entered the ship, just as it began its bombardment run. What happened inside the Stellar? Blade became legend among both species. Zarathix fought her way through corridors filled with warriors who had once served under her command. Some stood aside out of respect for her past service. Others fought her with the fury of those who felt betrayed. When she reached the command deck, Zekmith was waiting for her. Her former mentor was ancient by Zephyrian standards, his crystalline skin bearing the scars of 100 battles. "So the corrupted one comes to face judgment," he said as he drew his ceremonial blade. "You have forgotten what it means to be Zephyrian." "I have learned what it means to be more than Zephyrian," Zarathix replied as she accepted his challenge. The duel that followed was not the honorable combat that Zephyrian tradition demanded. Zarathix used every trick Jake had taught her about. Human fighting methods. She feinted, rolled, used the ship's geometry against her opponent, and fought with a creativity that Zekmuth could not match. When it was over, the old war commander lay defeated and the Stellar Blade's bombardment systems were shut down. The civilian population of New Terra was safe, and the extremist faction surrendered. When they learned of their leader's defeat, the aftermath of the battle brought changes that neither species had anticipated. The joint military action had proven that cooperation was not just possible, but more effective than competition. Within months, the first joint human Zephyrian colonies were being established in previously unexplored systems. Zarathix found herself appointed as the first interspecies liaison officer, a position that did not exist in either culture until they created it for her. She worked from a new station built jointly by both species, serving as a bridge between worlds that were learning to see each other as partners rather than threats. Jake received a promotion to admiral and command of the Joint Exploration Fleet. His tactics were studied in military academies on both human and Zephyrian worlds, though he insisted that the real victory had been learning to trust former enemies. 6 months after the battle at New Terra, Jake found himself standing on the observation deck of the joint station, watching ships from both species coming and going in peaceful cooperation. Zarathix joined him there, as she often did when her duties allowed. "Do you ever regret it?" Jake asked. "Leaving your old life behind?" Zarathix considered the question as she watched a human transport dock next to a Zephyrian science vessel. "I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I had never knelt before you and pleaded for my life. But then I see what we have built together, and I know that some mistakes are actually destiny." Jake smiled at her words. "From 'Don't slay me, human' to 'Let's explore the galaxy together.' That's quite a journey." "The journey is just beginning," Zarathix replied. "There are 1,000 worlds waiting to be discovered by our combined fleets. And perhaps there are other species out there who need to learn what we have learned." As they watched the traffic of ships representing two species working as one, both Jake and Zarathix knew that they had not just prevented a war. They had started something entirely new in the galaxy. The age of single-species dominance was ending, and the age of cooperation was beginning.